Be me, Laura. 28. I work in social media marketing, and I'd like to think I'm pretty aware of the world. I'm a feminist. Not the 90s kind, but the kind that understands systemic power structures. My whole life, I've been told that marriage is a partnership, a beautiful union. I see it for what it is. The oldest patriarchal institution, designed to benefit men while extracting unpaid labor from women. My friends complain about their boyfriends and husbands, but they don't see the big picture. They think their problems are individual, not systemic. I decided I needed to do more than just tweet about it. I needed to document it from the inside, a kind of field study, you could say. My subject, Mark. My husband of 2 years. He's the perfect specimen. 32, a software engineer. He's what society calls a good guy, which is exactly how the system works. It masks privilege with politeness. When we met, he already had his own apartment. Bought it himself a few years before we even knew each other. He had a decent car, a stable career path, and savings. People would say he was responsible. I saw a man who got a head start from a system built for him. My mission was clear. Live my life, but keep a record. Note down every single instance where the institution of marriage served him, propped him up, and left me carrying the invisible load. I was ready to prove my thesis. The project began on a quiet Tuesday evening, I think. It was a few months ago. We both got home from work around the same time. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and felt the day's stress weighing on me. He did the same, but then he drifted over to the couch and picked up a video game controller. He said he just needed 30 minutes to decompress from a stressful day of coding. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the empty fridge, the first piece of data for my log. We both had stressful days. We were both tired. But society had granted him a decompression period, while I was immediately faced with the mental load of what we were going to eat for dinner. He wasn't malicious. That's the insidious part. He just didn't see it. He was a fish swimming in patriarchal water. He didn't know he was wet. I ended up ordering takeout. When he asked what I wanted, I just told him to decide. He happily ordered pizza. I made a mental note. He was even outsourcing the labor of choosing a meal to me, under the guise of being considerate. A week or so later, we hit the topic of finances. This was always a big one for me. Mark earns a fair bit more than I do. It's the wage gap in action, right in my own home. He's always been the one to pay the mortgage on his apartment. He handles the utilities, the internet, the car insurance. He calls it covering the big stuff. I usually handle groceries, household supplies, planning our dates, buying gifts for his family. On paper, it looks like he's contributing more. But I see the truth. He's paying for his own assets. His mortgage is building his equity. His car is in his name. My financial contributions are ephemeral. They get used up, eaten, or thrown away. I'm pouring my money into the day-to-day maintenance of his life. That evening, he came to me with an idea. He suggested we open a joint savings account. He said we could both put a percentage of our paychecks into it for future goals, like a big vacation or maybe a down payment on a bigger place one day. It was presented as a smart, collaborative financial move. I saw it as a trap. It was a way to absorb my income into his financial sphere, a way to get me to start contributing to his assets directly. I told him I needed to keep my finances separate for my own sense of independence. He looked a little confused, maybe even hurt. He said something like, "Okay, I just thought it would be a good way for us to work together." He dropped it, but I knew what I had just avoided. It was a classic move to create financial dependency. I texted my friend Jessica about it later. She's on the same wavelength as me. Her reply came back almost instantly. "Total red flag. He's trying to control you." I knew it. The emotional labor became the most frequent entry in my notes. It's the kind of work no one sees. It was my job to remember his mother's birthday and buy a card. It was my job to notice we were low on paper towels. It was my job to schedule our dentist appointments. One Saturday, I asked him to take out the trash and recycling. He said, "Sure, in a minute," and went back to reading something on his phone. An hour later, it was still there. I had to ask him again. He did it immediately, with a quick apology. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I had to expend mental energy, not only to identify the task, but also to manage him to completion. I was his project manager, an unpaid one. Later that day, he cleaned the entire kitchen without me asking. He scrubbed the counters, mopped the floor, everything. He looked so proud of himself, like he deserved a medal. He said he wanted to do his part. I thanked him, of course, but what I saw was a man who performed a visible, praiseworthy task once a month, while my daily, invisible work went completely unnoticed. His contribution was an event. Mine was the atmosphere. We had some of his friends over for a game night. This was a goldmine of observations. The conversation naturally flowed to their work. They were all in tech. They talked about programming languages, new hardware, and problems at their jobs. Mark was in his element. He was treated as an expert, an authority. Someone asked me what I did. I told them I was a social media marketing manager. They just nodded. "Oh, cool. So you do, like, Instagram for companies?" My complex job, which involves strategy, analytics, and content creation, was reduced to doing Instagram. No one asked any follow-up questions. The conversation immediately went back to tech. I felt like an accessory in my own home. I was Mark's wife, a supporting character in his story. Later, one of his friends, the loud one, the one who always felt like a walking stereotype of toxic masculinity, saw Mark loading the dishwasher. He laughed and said, "Dude, she's got you so well trained." Mark just rolled his eyes and laughed it off. But I didn't. I heard the subtext. Domestic work is women's work. A man doing it is a sign of weakness, of being trained. The entire social structure was present in that one stupid joke, and my husband was complicit in it through his silence. The vacation incident was a big one. It felt like a turning point. I'd been feeling burnt out for a while. Juggling my job and the unacknowledged second shift at home was exhausting. I mentioned I wanted to go somewhere, maybe to a beach resort, just to lie down and do nothing for a week. Mark saw how tired I was. He was sweet about it, telling me I deserved a break. About 2 weeks later, he came home with a huge smile on his face. He told me to pack my bags. He had a surprise for me. He'd booked a week-long trip for us, a beautiful rustic cabin in the mountains. He had planned everything: hikes, a nice dinner at a lodge, even a little town to explore. He was so excited. He thought he'd done this amazing romantic thing, and all I could feel was a cold wave of resentment. I had specifically mentioned a beach, a place to rest. He had planned an active, hiking-focused trip to the mountains, his ideal vacation. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't collaborated with me. He had made a unilateral decision about my time, my energy, and my relaxation. This wasn't a gift. It was an act of control. It was him demonstrating that he was the one who made the big decisions in our lives. I put on a smile and told him it was wonderful. What else could I do? The whole week in the mountains, I felt like I was playing a part. I'd pose for pictures with the scenic backdrop, all while documenting my feelings in the Notes app on my phone. He thought we were creating memories. I was gathering evidence. When we got back, I described the situation to Jessica. She told me it was a classic example of benevolent sexism. He was treating me like a child who needed to be surprised and managed, not like an equal partner. She was right. The months went on like this. My logbook of grievances grew longer and more detailed. The way he would just assume I would be the one to stay home for a furniture delivery. The way he'd call his car my baby, but never once offered to clean the bathroom. The way he'd fall asleep on the couch, leaving me to turn off all the lights and lock the doors, like a night watchman in my own home. Each instance on its own seemed small, trivial even, but woven together, they created a tapestry of systemic inequality. Mark was not a bad man. He was a product of a system that had coddled him, centered him, and taught him to be oblivious to his own privilege. My resentment was calcifying. It was becoming a hard, solid thing inside my chest. He could feel the distance between us. I knew he could. Sometimes he'd ask me if I was okay, if something was wrong. "I'm just tired," I'd say. It wasn't a lie. I was tired of everything. The breaking point came in the fall. It was a Thursday. Mark came home from work, radiating excitement. He practically bounced through the door. He told me he'd gotten it, the promotion he'd been working towards for over a year. It came with a huge raise, a new title, more responsibility. He picked me up and spun me around. He was ecstatic. He started talking about the future. "Now we can really start saving," he said. "This changes everything." I felt nothing, just a cold, clinical clarity. I saw exactly what this meant. More responsibility for him at work meant less availability from him at home. A bigger salary for him meant an even wider financial gap between us, increasing his power and my dependency. He saw this as a victory for us. I saw it as the final brick in the wall of my patriarchal prison. He was celebrating a promotion that would be built on the back of my increased unpaid labor. He was talking about a fancy dinner to celebrate. I stood there, looking at this happy, clueless man, and I knew my research was complete. "I can't do this anymore, Mark," I said. The smile vanished from his face. He put me down slowly. "Do what? What are you talking about?" He had no idea. Of course he didn't. He had never seen the bars of the cage. He just stood there in the middle of the living room, completely baffled. "Can't do what, Laura? Celebrate my promotion? I don't understand." The naivety was almost stunning. It was like trying to explain color to someone born blind. "This," I said, making a vague gesture to the apartment, to us. "This arrangement, this entire system, it's not working for me." I tried to explain it. I used the terms I had been documenting for months: emotional labor, the mental load, the invisible second shift. I told him how I felt like a manager in my own home, how his career was being built on a foundation of my free work. He just kept shaking his head, a look of genuine hurt and confusion on his face. "I thought we were a team," he said. "I do things around the house. I cook sometimes. I do the dishes." He started listing tasks, like a child presenting a report card to a parent. He'd taken out the recycling last week. He'd fixed the leaky faucet a month ago. He was seeing individual trees and was completely missing the forest. He couldn't grasp the concept of a systemic imbalance. He only saw his own good intentions. That's the most dangerous part of privilege. It convinces you that your intentions are all that matter. The conversation went in circles for what felt like hours. He was defensive. I was clinical. He asked if I was unhappy. I told him I was enlightened. He asked if there was someone else. The ultimate male ego response. He couldn't fathom that the problem was the structure, not a competing man. The conversation ended with me telling him I needed space. I was going to stay with Jessica for a few days to think. He looked crushed. "Don't go," he said. "We can fix this. Whatever it is, we can fix it." But you can't fix something that isn't broken. From his perspective, the system was working perfectly. That was the whole problem. MFW. I walk out the door, feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I spent the next few days at Jessica's apartment. It was like a strategy session. She validated everything I was feeling. She had seen it all with her ex. She called his cluelessness weaponized incompetence. He wasn't stupid. The system incentivized him to be ignorant. We talked about my options. The idea of going back felt impossible. It would mean erasing my findings, agreeing to live in the dark again. Jessica was the one who first said the word divorce. I had been thinking it, but hearing it out loud made it real. It wasn't about a failed marriage. It was about liberating myself from an oppressive system. Jessica recommended a lawyer, a woman, obviously, someone who gets it. I made the appointment. This wasn't an emotional decision anymore. It was a tactical one. Meeting the lawyer was empowering. She was sharp, professional, and didn't waste time with sentimentality. I explained my situation. I didn't frame it as a personal grievance. I framed it as a case of accumulated, unpaid domestic and emotional labor contributing to the growth of shared marital assets. The lawyer just nodded. She'd heard versions of this story 1,000 times. She pulled out a notepad and started talking about the law. She explained that even though Mark owned the apartment before we were married, any increase in its value during our marriage was considered a marital asset. The same went for his retirement accounts, his savings, anything that had grown in value while we were married. My contributions, managing the household, creating a stable environment that allowed him to focus on his high-earning career, were legally recognized as contributions to that growth. It was everything I had been theorizing, but now it had a legal framework. My invisible work was about to become very, very visible on a balance sheet. I left her office feeling like I had a solid plan, a path to reclamation. Mark had been texting me the whole time, pleading messages, confused messages, angry messages. He wanted to go to therapy. He wanted to talk. He wanted me to just come home so we could figure it out. I finally agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop. He looked terrible. He hadn't been sleeping. He told me he loved me. He said he was willing to do anything. He'd make a chore chart. We could hire a cleaner. He was offering superficial fixes to a systemic problem, like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. I told him my decision was made. I was filing for divorce. The word hit him like a physical blow. He actually recoiled. He started asking why, over and over. I just don't understand what I did wrong. It's not what you did, I explained, for what felt like the 100th time. It's what the system does through you. You benefit from it, whether you mean to or not. He didn't get it. He just kept saying, "But I love you," as if love negated the patriarchal power imbalance. In fact, it's often the tool used to enforce it. The conversation was useless. We were speaking two different languages. I left him sitting there. It was the last time we spoke without lawyers present. The legal process was surprisingly straightforward. Mark hired a lawyer, and the negotiations began. His initial offer was insulting. He offered to let me keep my car and a small portion of our joint savings. He clearly thought he could just get rid of me. He argued that the apartment was his, premarital. His lawyer tried to push that angle hard. My lawyer didn't flinch. She came back with a detailed appraisal of the apartment's value on our wedding day versus its value now. The property market had boomed. The increase in equity was substantial. We presented our case. My role as a domestic manager enabled Mark's career success, which in turn funded the mortgage and allowed the asset to grow. My labor was directly tied to that financial gain. Mark was furious. I heard through the lawyers that he was calling it unbelievable and theft. He saw his paycheck as his own achievement. He didn't see the platform of domestic stability I provided that made his long hours and work focus possible. The battle went on for a few months. His legal bills were probably piling up. In the end, his lawyer must have told him he was going to lose in court. He conceded. The final settlement was a masterpiece of justice. I was awarded 50% of the appreciated value of the apartment. He would have to either sell it or take out a new loan to buy out my share. I received 50% of all savings and investments accumulated during the marriage. And the best part? The court awarded me 2 years of spousal support, what they called rehabilitative alimony. My lawyer argued that my career had been deprioritized during the marriage for the sake of his, and I needed this support to reestablish myself on an equal footing. It was a legal acknowledgement of everything I had been fighting for. The system that had oppressed me was now being forced to compensate me for my labor. It was perfect. I moved into a nice new apartment in a better neighborhood. I used part of the settlement to furnish it exactly how I wanted. No compromises. The rest I invested wisely, with the help of a financial advisor. My life was finally my own. The mental load I had been carrying for years just evaporated. I only had to worry about my own meals, my own schedule, my own mess. It was bliss. A few weeks ago, I launched a new blog, a space to talk about my experiences, to help other women see the systems at play in their own lives. My first major post was titled, "I Survived a Patriarchal Marriage. Here's the proof that it's a man's game." I laid out my entire thesis. I didn't use Mark's name, but I used our story as a case study. I explained that marriage is the single best deal a man can get. He gets a live-in chef, a personal assistant, a cleaner, a therapist, and a social planner, all for the low, low price of a ring. He builds his career, his wealth, his assets, all while a woman maintains the home front, depleting her own energy and often sacrificing her own ambitions. I argued that divorce isn't a failure for women. It's a long overdue invoice for services rendered. It's back pay. The post went viral in my circles. The support was incredible. So many women telling me, "This is my life. You put it into words." I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Mark had to sell the apartment. He couldn't afford to buy me out and keep it. He's renting a small one-bedroom place across town now. Apparently, he sends me angry emails sometimes, but they go straight to a spam filter I set up. I saw one of the subject lines before I blocked him completely. Something like, "You ruined my life." He still doesn't get it. I didn't ruin his life. I just took back mine. He's not suffering because I'm a bad person. He's suffering because he's finally having to do his own emotional and domestic labor for the first time in his adult life. He's just upset that he lost his privileges. My experiment was a complete success. It proved my hypothesis beyond a shadow of a doubt. Marriage, in its current form, is a system of male privilege, and I have the settlement check to prove it.